So in this video, we'll take a closer look at this Asus mini PC, the PN series. This one have a 5000 series AMD Ryzen 9, not the latest and greatest as of this video. This is kind of last gen with Radeon graphics. But considering I do have DDR4 memory already and I have PCI Express Gen 3 NVMe SSDs on hand, this is just the cheapest solution for me, and this one was in stock here locally, and this will be plenty of power for whatever I'm going to use personally. So the most powerful thing I will do with this one here is photo editing. Hope the 8-core and 16-thread will be fine enough for that. So let's have a look around the box here. Black coloring all the way around. Of course, Asus branding here, some serial numbers and stuff here I'm not going to show you. And this is of course the AMD version. And I believe the one I bought actually have two USB-A on the front and one USB Type-C, or at least that was the model I was hoping to buy. Little Asus branding here on the right side as well, or excuse me, left side. And then of course we have the bottom side here. You can see the model or the CPU, AMD Ryzen 9 5900HX. So top of the line of these mobile CPUs from Ryzen or AMD last gen. This one also have a Wi-Fi 6E wireless module, but I believe this is one of those AMD branded MediaTek wireless cards. So I actually also went out and bought the latest and greatest Wi-Fi 6E from Intel. This is the AX411 because I recently got a Wi-Fi 6E router and I want to take full advantage of that on this one here. So I'm gonna throw that in as well. Other than that, we of course have the seal here. Let's just cut through that and have a closer look and see what we actually get in the box. Just like so, and opening it up, and man, this thing is just so tiny. I'm going to upgrade from a Lenovo Mini 5i ThinkCenter, I believe it was called, or something like that. But yeah, that was also a mini 1 liter PC, but man, so much bigger than this. This one is just tiny. That's almost comically how tiny it is. First off, let's see what else we get in the box. As usual, save the best for last. We have In Search for Incredible. So this is a warranty card, or warranty book rather, relatively thick. And of course you can read everything about the warranty in here. I'm not really sure what kind of warranty you get with this one. Asus usually have pretty good warranties, so I believe at least 2 years. Mini system PC technical updates. Great little template, a lot of paperwork. And some mini start guide here, a quick start guide in various languages. Let's just take a look at that pretty quick. So of course that will just take you through all of the specifications and port layout and where you can place the Kingston lock, and you can also have a little padlock to lock it in place so you cannot swap out anything without you knowing. And also how to disassemble this one. Very easy, just 4 screws in the bottom, then flip everything over. And you can in this one here have 2 NVMe SSDs and a SATA SSD or hard drive as well. But if you install a hard drive, you'll kind of lose out a little bit on the SSD 2 or the second SSD. It will lose half its bandwidth, so only running at 2 times speed. But that's a worthy trade-off in my opinion, because PCI Express Gen 3 times 2 is still 2 gigabytes per second. Pretty fast in my opinion, but anyways, very easy to get in and upgrade and install various components. We're going to install 32 gigabytes of memory and 2 NVMe SSDs, as well as a 2 terabyte spinning hard drive. A little bit of information about the VESA mount included, so you can mount it behind your monitor. It's a nice little added bonus. Not something I'm going to do, but I might just wall mount it, or maybe I'll mount it underneath my desk. Not really sure just yet, so it's nice that there at least is some screws so you can mount something too. And you also get this little plate there, I believe. And is that a DVD with drivers? What? I haven't seen like a DVD with drivers for so long time. Else, we do get 2 screws for those NVMe SSDs. So those are included, not pre-mounted. Also get 4 extra screws, I believe, for the legs. If you end up losing one or breaking one, or maybe it's for something else. We'll also kind of investigate a little further in the video here. 4 other screws, I believe those are for hard drives, because you still need screws to mount a hard drive, SATA SSD or regular spinning 2.5-inch hard drive. Then we do have the power supply. It's a relatively big power supply, but I believe it's also 150 wattage. Oh, excuse me, at 120 wattage. So 20 volt, 6 amp, 120 wattage, but that is definitely more than sufficient for this system. It can draw like up to 45 watt, I believe, the CPU alone. And of course, you do not have any dedicated GPUs in here. You only have the iGPU. That's included, I believe, in those 45 wattage. So all the other stuff like NVMe SSDs, fans, and all the stuff you have connected, I don't think you will even hit like 80 wattage on a system like this. And we have a standard barrel plug here on the other end. And this is a relatively slim power supply, actually. It's quite nice. And then we get a power cable. This is a standard European power cable, so 2 plugs for my country here, round plugs. But of course, depending on where you get yours, you'll get a different plug. This other end here is used primarily for like laptops and stuff like that. Of course, plug it into your power supply and you have this relatively beefy power brick here, but you can of course always just use double-sided tape and stick it underneath your desk. That's definitely what I have plans to do, so keep it out of the way. And then we have some other screws that I'm not really sure what is, but maybe we'll find that out in this video here. But 2 of those little odd looking screws. And then we have the VESA mount. And I kind of like that this is included because yeah, not only can you mount it behind your monitor, I have specific arms for all my monitors. So I do use the VESA mount on all my monitors for the arms I have on those, and one I have is wall mounted as well. But you could potentially just screw this underneath your desk or on the wall or whatever and kind of just use it the same way. The 2 last screws we looked at, I think they have something to do with this mount here. So you can kind of just put them in here, lock this one in place, and you cannot really remove the screws again because it will kind of grip onto the screw head here using this like bracket design. Little odd design in my opinion, but fine enough. And fine enough for just hanging the device. But if you want to hang it upside down, I probably recommend you use some kind of double-sided tape if you want to mount it underneath your desk. But anyways, I like that this is included as well. Kind of nice. That's all we have in the box. Let's just remove that and have a closer look at the little main competitor here, our main device. Man, this thing is just so small. I can't really get over that. Let's get it out here and have a closer look. And first off, what I want to see, oh yeah, I do have those 2 USB-A ports here. So even though the photo on the box doesn't really specify that this is specifically the one with 2 USB ports on the front, this definitely is the same that I seen on the images. Let's have a look around the device. So yeah, like I said, front 2 USB Type A, USB Type C. I believe this is also 10 gigabit. We have headphones / microphone jack here on the front. We do also have a little hard drive activity LED. I really like those activity LEDs. Those remind me of the good old days. Of course, power button here on the right, nice and easy to press. Kind of like that understated black design, but that's of course a matter of taste. On the right side, we do have plenty of ventilation holes. Doesn't seem to have any kind of dust filter, maybe like all the way up towards the top here. So seems to be a little bit of dust filter. Not the finest dust filter, so can only really catch like bigger things. But kind of nice, there's a little bit of dust filter in there, of filtration. It's all made by plastic, by the way, so top, bottom, everything is made of plastic. Feels pretty sturdy, so have no complaints there. And on the back side is where you have that little padlock or little hole here for a padlock, because you need to remove this part here to be able to get inside the device. So you can put a little padlock on here so you can see if anybody have broken into your computer. Probably not something most people will use at home, but in the business environment, it could be handy. This specific device here have a display port. This is display 1.4, 2 times HDMI. They are marketed as HDMI 2.1, but they can only handle up to 60 frames per second at 4K. That's a little unfortunate. Personally, I plan to use just DisplayPort. This is a 1.4, so should be able to handle up to 8K at, 30 frames per second, so 120 at 4K. I'm gonna connect this to a 4K monitor, or I have a super ultra wide monitor, which is very close to 4K resolution. But you can also, you can see this, the second USB Type-C plug here, the only one on the back. You can also connect this to a display adapter and just adapt this out to display 1.4. And maybe you can even get 120 Hz at 4K from the display port. Should be able to support it if you can find the right adapter. But anyways, you can connect 2 display ports or 2 displays using DisplayPort, or you can connect 2 monitors using HDMI, or of course you can just use only HDMI. I believe you can have up to 3 monitors on this one, which is pretty nice. I'm going to connect only 2 monitors, one close to 4K and one 1080p. So I'm just going to use display for one and HDMI for the other. The USB Type-C here on the back is 10 gigabit. So this is the faster variant. We have 3 more USB Type-A. One underneath the USB Type-C is also 10 gigabit. And the 2 other is standard 5 gigabit. And then we have 2.5 gigabit LAN. This is a Realtek LAN. And of course DC in for connecting the included power adapter. Pretty easy and angle plug, so it doesn't really take up much space here on the back. And the inclusion of 2.5 gigabit LAN is very nice these days, even though you can get like very cheap USB adapters. Something like this one here, USB-A to 2.5 gigabit LAN, actually works quite well. But it's nice to have it installed. By default, a lot of ventilation holes here on the back. I believe this is where all the air is blown out. There's a little fan in here blowing air, hot air out towards the back. Left side, we see pretty much the same setup. A lot of ventilation here and a little bit of a dust filter underneath, as well as a Kensington lock. And on the bottom side here, we do have those 4 rubber feet that also holds the screws. And you have to remove those to get inside this little computer, and a little bit of ventilation here in the bottom as well, also with a little bit of dust filtration underneath. But this dust filter again doesn't really catch all the finer dust debris, so not really all that useful, but still fine enough. And those 2 screws there, or screw holes rather, is for the VESA mounting, or use the little bracket that's included. So very nice addition there as well. So I'm going to upgrade to 32 gigabytes, 3200 DDR4 SODIMM here from Kingston Fury. I have used these in another machine. I know these work reliably. I'm going to use this 1 terabyte Western Digital NVMe SSD that I've also used in another system. I haven't really written a lot of data to it, maybe a terabyte max. And this is going to be my main drive. My second drive is going to be my Samsung here that I've also pulled from my other mini computer actually. I'm just going to throw this in as a secondary drive. I'm not really sure I will need it, but I have room for 2 NVMEs, so why not occupy that when I have those available. And then I'm going to install this standard mechanical drive. This is a 2.5 inch, 2 terabyte Seagate mobile hard drive. So I'm pretty much going to use all the available space on the inside of this little chassis, at least when it comes to storage. And of course, we'll try to upgrade to the latest and greatest Intel Wi-Fi card as well, just to get the fastest throughput. So let's get the anti-static gloves on and get into this little mini PC. I don't think it is by design that you can kind of remove the screws by just twisting the legs. I think they actually want you to use a screwdriver, because these are rubber feet and doesn't really hold on to the screws. So get out the screwdriver. Once you kind of get going, loosen the screws a little bit, you can just kind of twist them out like so. Very easy to do. And the screws are captive and seem to be spring loaded as well. So, wow, nice little detail actually. So you won't lose those screws, accidentally at least. And then we should just be able to open it up. I believe there is some ribbon cable inside. Just be aware of that. And yeah, exactly. Ribbon cable on the inside. And let's have a look at that LAN card. And you can see, yeah, it is definitely a MediaTek LAN card. I'm not saying anything bad about MediaTek. I think they actually make nice enough products. But for me personally, I have more confidence when it comes to wireless card. If I use an Intel card, I have better experience with those, as well as Bluetooth as well. But I've also used MediaTek in my other computer and it's been reliable for me. So yeah, again, I've had no issues, but I've seen a lot of bad talk about those online. But I just want to get the latest and greatest and the fastest in this machine. So we're going to upgrade that. And let's just start with that actually, because we cannot get to it after we have mounted a NVMe SSD. And I think it's actually easier to remove these ribbon cables, but you can kind of get around without having to do so. So let's install the memory first. So 32 gigabyte DDR4 SODIMM memory kit from Kingston. This is the third machine. I had it in a laptop originally, a Lenovo Legion 5 Pro. Then I had a Lenovo mini computer, 1 liter computer that I recently sold to get this one instead. So I've had plenty of experience using this in other machines, and I've run mem test on all the other machines as well. So I know these work very well. So that's the first part. Let's get over to the other part of the build here. See if we can actually stand it up. Yeah, you can do so. Just stand the side up like this and you should get in there pretty easily. Let's get the smaller screwdrivers, remove this wireless LAN card, just like so, and remove those little antennas. Just make sure you connect them in the same direction or same orientation, so you have main and you have aux. Main is usually the black wire and aux is the white wire. This is the MediaTek card. And here we have the Intel card. I'm covering all my numbers on there, serial numbers, EMI numbers, and so on. Don't want to share those. But it's the AX411NGW. It's a little bit different in terms of its plug. You can see here, this have a little bit different plug, but it should work just fine. It's just the layout of the plugs a little bit different. Hopefully I am right. As you can see here, it definitely fits inside the socket. So let me just mount that. So that install finally done. Took a lot longer than I would like to admit, but it's there right now. Next step, let's just install an NVMe SSD. The first one we're going to install, the main drive, Western Digital PCSN 730, 1 terabyte PCI Express Gen 3 NVMe SSD. This should pretty much saturate the PCI Express 3.0 bandwidth. It's pretty easy to install, just like any other NVMe SSD. Plug it in one end and other end should line up just fine with the screw hole there. And this is of course where you need to find those screws that is included inside the packaging. Of course you need one for this one and also one for the second one we're going to install, just like this. Easy to install. And the other one goes into the bottom side here. You can see on the where my thumb is right there on the right. First one also have some thermal tape here. You can see on the bottom as well to add a little bit as a cooling. The second one does have that on the bottom side of the SSD as well. So you could probably only use one-sided SSD on the second slot, because if you have memory modules on the back side, it will probably interfere with that thermal pad that's already pre-applied. Of course, also remove that, but it's nice to have a little bit of cooling. So to be able to install this one here, is easiest to actually install the whole case upside down or on the side like this. And then you have free access to SSD slot number 2. And the second NVMe SSD will just be this 500 gigabyte Samsung 970 EVO Plus. Plug it in the same way like so. And use the second screw that's included and just screw it in place. Can kind of feel that thermal tape underneath kind of gripping the SSD. So yeah, definitely no double-sided SSD inside here. Keep that in mind. The second SSD is pretty nicely installed now. It's actually bending quite a bit, but I don't think it will be an issue. Next off, let's just install the hard drive. And the hard drive is going in right here. And the SATA plug and power plug is already pre-attached to the bottom side here. So let's just slide in the hard drive. And you need to slide it in this orientation here. So like with the label, down towards the bottom or towards the legs. Sure, and you can only use, I believe, is it up to 9.2 millimeter hard drive, so up to 2 terabyte hard drive. I believe this is a 9.2 millimeter, so between 7 and 9.2 millimeters you can use in this one here, not the thicker ones. And like this, nicely clicking into place. I believe there are some screw holes on the side. Yeah, there are screw holes, so let's just see if we can use those screws. I believe it's these ones here, the black ones. Let's try those. You just need to take extra care here because the case kind of want to flip over. You can kind of twist the ribbon cable a little bit. I actually did that, so I hope it's not damaged. But screw this in place like this. The side, and definitely, yeah, it's those black screws there. Kind of feels like it's all the way in, but it kind of want to go in even further. I do not think there's any screw holes on the other side. So only really 2 screws in one side. No, you only have 3 screws for the hard drive. Just went to double check here. So I guess you have an extra screw. So if you have a screw loose, you're good to go here. And that's pretty much it. Now we just need to sandwich it all together. I want to make totally sure that I have not accidentally ripped this cable out or anything like that. Kind of twisting a little bit more than I would like to. But nah, it seemed good. So just put the lid, or actually the bottom section here, back on. Squeeze it in place just like that. And you can kind of finger tighten the screws up to a certain point and then use a little screwdriver to get it all tucked in there. And fingers crossed everything is just working. You never really know. I like to cross tighten everything, so going from corner to corner is my preferred method. And of course make sure I don't over tighten this. It is a plastic chassis, so could accidentally crack if it has too much force. So I think this is fine. Screwed well in place. Of course, adds a little bit to the weight. Let's just see how much it actually weighs with all this stuff inside. Still under a kilo. Is 839 grams. Of course, you have to account for the power supply as well. So then we're up to like 1.3 kilo, but still very, very small package. I'm still very impressed by the small size of this little computer. It's just so tiny, so cute. I can't wait to get this up and running. Let's just plug it in, test and see if it will work and boot just fine. A little bit strange that the USB is upside down here on the back. Don't know if you can see that, but the big part of the USB stick here needs to go in to the top. So like so. On the front is the right orientation in abstracts, where it goes in like in the bottom. You can see there's some more spacing there. compared to on the back. So just a little thing to keep a note of. A little bit annoying, but anyways, all we need now is the power supply. So nothing happens when plugging it in. Let's try and turn it on. Definitely hear a fan. Let me just hold it up to the camera. I don't know if you hear this, but definitely a fan is running, and we actually have a little LED in the power button. So let me just get everything set up and we'll get on with the video. So I have spent a few days with the Asus PN52, and unfortunately I have to send it back. It's just not performing up to par with what you can expect with a Ryzen 9 5900HX. Even in a small form factor like this, it should perform a lot better. Out of the box with a standard profile in the BIOS in terms of cooling solution, it is set to use up to 60 watt of power to the CPU. But if I run a Cinebench benchmark, it will just fluctuate all over the place and it will never really hit 100%. It will just constantly throttle because it's never able to hit 60 watt on all cores, even in short bursts. So it will constantly just fluctuate all the way down to below 1 GHz in frequency and up to 4.2 GHz of frequency, turbo boosting, but like up and down constantly and never really reaches 100% utilization on all core. What I found is if I limit it to 55 watt, it will work kind of okay and it will perform pretty decently, although still not performing up to par with what I would expect from a Ryzen 9 5900HX, especially the Geekbench score. It's not really that overwhelming. The other issue I have with this one is noise. This thing is very loud. So default, out of the box, it comes with the standard BIOS, like set up to 60 watt, and the fan just constantly ramps up and goes up into the low 4000 RPM because it's turbo boosting constantly when you open applications and so on using the system. And not only do you have just airflow noise or fan noise, but you also have a constant whine. As soon as the fan goes above like the 2000 RPM, you kind of have a annoying whiny noise. And it just cut through everything, and it is pretty much the loudest thing in my office. One solution is going to the BIOS and set it to the quiet BIOS, which will limit the CPU to 30 watt, but then you're never really able to hit more than 3 GHz in all core performance. That's not really the best solution when you pay for like a 3.3 GHz base frequency CPU. Another thing you can do is disable the auto boost feature, so it will automatically overclock to up to like 4.2, 4.3 GHz. You can kind of go into the register database and make an edit to one of the entries there, and then into power settings, and you can disable the precision boost overdrive. That will kind of work okay, and it will be much more silent, but you're also leaving a little bit of performance on the table in terms of like opening applications and so on, where it will just boost up to that 4.2 GHz, because then it will just maximum get up to the 3.3 GHz. Definitely be much more quiet and still a very fast system. So something you should consider if you have a system like this is definitely to disable precision boost overdrive. Another thing you can do is download the Asus software that you can find on the Microsoft App Store. From there, you can get into the fan setting, and there is also a silent profile there, and you can still keep the standard profile inside the BIOS of your system. So it will boost up to the 60 watt short boost durations. So you can still get pretty much the same performance, but the thermal threshold will just get up to around the 95 degrees. So only around the 95 degrees, it will start to ramp up the fan, else the fan will run at around 2000 RPM constant, which is definitely a much more pleasant experience. Pretty much whatever you do on your system, the fan will just keep at a constant 2000 RPM, which is not all that loud, and a pretty comfortable fan noise profile. Doesn't hum that much at those RPM levels, but then again, like I said, getting up to like the 95 degrees Celsius from the CPU is a little bit toasty, I think, before the fan actually will start to ramp up and cool the CPU effectively down. So if you want a more quiet system, that's definitely the solution I will go for. Download the software and just set the fan profile to silent from there. Then you still get a good performance computer or mini PC, what you kind of pay for, but of course at the expense of a much hotter CPU when you're actually pushing it a little bit. But I think it's a bit flawed system. So I'm going to return mine. I do want to be able to just take full advantage of that CPU, but I'm not able to do so unless I limit the wattage, and still it will not really perform all that well. This small form factor here, cooling solution is not really the greatest. It does cool it pretty well, but it is heavily dependent on very loud and very fast fan inside. So it can run up to 4200 RPM, and it does so if you're trying to push the system in all core performance. It definitely get up to that very fast, unless of course you use one of those other settings that I talked about before. So for me personally, I recently bought the Intel NUC 12 Pro, which is going to be my mini computer going forward. I'm still gonna keep my eyes out for the replacement for this one here, the PN53. But as of recording this video, it's not out yet, so I couldn't really get my hands on that one. And also I had DDR4 memory laying around I wanted to use. The newer one, of course, uses DDR5, but I really like this port layout, so you can get like a USB Type-C in the front, 2 USB Type-A, have it nearby, so this will act like a USB hub. And also on the back side, you have a full-size display port, as well as 2 HDMIs. But in terms of the HDMI, one issue though is they do not support 144 Hz. I have some Dell monitors that over HDMI only are able to, for some reason, to handle like 60 Hz or 144 Hz. These HDMI ports just cannot handle that, so I have to go into software like CRU, or you can also go into the Radeon software and set a custom resolution so it can run at a 120 Hz at 1440p. That works quite well. But that's also one minor annoyance, considering this is a computer. It's not able to handle like a proper monitor resolution or refresh rate. Like 144 Hz is pretty common. My Intel NUC 12 Pro handles that just fine. It can work on HDMI 144 without any issues. This one only up to 120 Hz at 1440p. And of course up to 60 Hz at 4K over HDMI. But other than that, I really like the form factor. I really like the design and the aesthetics. And I like the port layout and the port selection. And the fact that you can have 2 NVMe SSDs in here is a nice feature that I really like, as well as a 2.5-inch hard drive or SSD as well. So you can have 3 fast SSD built in. But the replacement unit, the PN53, you can do the same. But both of the 2 PCI Express NVMe SSDs can handle up to 4 lanes at PCI Express ×4 speed. This one, only the one main SSD is 4 lanes, the second one is 2 lanes, so you're effectively cutting the transfer speed in half on the second SSD in there. So definitely does take a toll on the performance if you are transferring files to and from the 2 SSDs inside. So yeah, I'm going to take it apart right now, and I'm going to replace it to where I bought it to get my money back, and I'm now just rocking my Intel NUC 12 Pro. So I'm not really sure I will recommend this specific setup. If you're into like the Asus PN series, maybe just get the Ryzen 5 or maybe even the Ryzen 7. You can get that at a good deal, because I feel like the cooling solution here inside is not really adequate to like be able to cool a 8-core CPU, unfortunately. And the noise floor you have to live with to get effective cooling inside here is just a little bit too much. Maybe if you are in an office environment or you use it in a server cabinet or something like that, it could be okay. But if you use it right next to you on your table, which is what I'm going to use this small form factor computer, then it's just too loud. And of course, if you limit it either in BIOS to the quiet mode or the quiet fan profile within the software, you also limit either the performance or the thermal threshold. So we'll get a lot hotter and perform a lot less. So that's not really a perfect ideal setting for this system here, and it is not really inexpensive. It actually costs more than my Core i7 12 Pro NUC. So that's been unboxing, setting up, and reviewing this small Asus PN52 Ryzen 9 machine. If you're interested in this machine here, of course, I can share some affiliate link down in the description below. But that's pretty much all I have for this video. I hope to see you again in the future one. Until then, take care.